My friends and fellow students on the path, I greet you not as a speaker to an audience, but as one consciousness awakening to its own self. We have gathered here, not in a room of separate individuals, but in the silent, holy sanctuary of a single listening heart. There is a voice, not one that speaks to the outer ear, or one that is heard in the clamor of the world. It is a soundless voice, a pressure upon the soul, an ever-unfolding revelation in the depths of your own being. The world calls out with 1,000 demands, but this is the divine impulse, the eternal now of God speaking. You have felt it. In a moment of sudden peace amidst chaos, in a flash of intuitive knowing that had no logical source, in a yearning so deep it felt like a holy homesickness. This is the activity of the infinite invisible, pressing against the confines of your finite understanding, seeking to express itself as your life. Many have come to believe that God is a distant king who issues decrees. But I am here to tell you that God is the very core of your being, and its message is not a threat from a cloud, but an urgent, loving imperative from within your own soul. It is the final demand of the Christ within you, rising to cast out every last shadow of the mortal sense of self. The subject before us is grave, and it is glorious. We have titled it, Godis, Tishis my IG8TBT last time we yo EVR. Well, this is not a warning of an ending, but an invitation to a beginning so radical, so complete, that it can feel like a death to everything you have thought you were. What if this moment, right now, as you sit and listen, is the last time you ever hear this truth with the outer ear, because you are being called to become the living embodiment of it? The nature of this finality and the glorious freedom it heralds is what we shall meditate upon together. But I must ask you now, as we stand at this threshold, are you truly prepared to listen not to my words, but to the word itself, and to let it so transform you that you will never be the same again? If your soul answers yes, then I urge you to journey with us fully. Engage with this message, for in doing so, you engage with your own awakening. Like this video, if it resonates, comment the number 11 below as a symbol of your readiness to transition from the old to the new, and subscribe. For we are not just sharing information here, but building a community of practice in the one, eternal truth, says indeed. For if we are to understand the profound and urgent nature of this message, we must first correct a fundamental misconception that has plagued human consciousness for centuries. We have been taught to look for God as a being, a personage, a king seated on a distant throne in a faraway heaven, a magnified version of a human father who dispenses rewards and punishments based on a set of rules we can never quite fully obey. This concept of a remote deity is the very barrier that prevents us from hearing what God is saying right now, in this very moment. It is this image that must be shattered before the real message can be received. The truth that has been revealed to every mystic and spiritual seer is that God is the infinite invisible. God is the very substance and life of all form, the divine consciousness in which all phenomena appear and have their being. God is not a noun, but a verb, the eternal activity of life, truth, and love. God is the I that I am, the very core of your own being, closer than your breath, nearer than your hands and feet. We do not have to send our thoughts out into the cosmos, hoping to reach a celestial ear. We must instead turn within, into the deepest silence of our own being, for that is where the kingdom of God is and always has been. This is not a God you can petition or beg, for this God is the very principle of your existence, the very law of your being. When we begin to perceive God in this light, not as a separate entity, but as the very fabric of our consciousness, the entire spiritual path is transformed. It is no longer a journey to a destination, but a process of unfolding, of yielding, of allowing this divine consciousness to express itself as our individual experience. Our work is not to build a connection to God, but to realize the connection that has always eternally been here. It is to remove the barriers of belief, of fear, of a sense of separation and sin that we have erected against this truth. The hunger we feel, the longing for something more sacred and meaningful, is not a sign of God's absence, but the pressure of this infinite invisible seeking to know itself as our individual life. This understanding is the foundation upon which we must build, for the message we are about to contemplate carries a weight that the human sense of a remote God could never bear. It would be a terrifying message if it came from a king, but because it emanates from the very core of your own being, from the infinite love that is your true identity, it is the most natural, the most liberating, and the most urgent call you will ever hear. It is the call to stop living from the outer rim of your being, from the reactions of the personal sense, and to begin living from the center, from the divine impulse of the I am. This is the first and most critical step, for without this foundation, the words that follow will be misinterpreted, and the great, final opportunity may slip by unnoticed, not because God has withdrawn it, but because we were looking for it in the wrong place, in the sky, instead of in the very heart of our own awareness. And so, we come to the great question that naturally arises from this foundation. If God is the very substance of my being, the very I of me, then how does this God speak? How do we, who have been conditioned to listen for thunderclaps and written commandments, perceive a communication that is emanating from within our own consciousness? The answer, my friends, is found not in the outer world of noise and effect, but in the inner world of cause and stillness. It is what the ancient scriptures have poetically called the still small voice. This is not a voice that competes with the clamor of your daily life, nor is it a voice that shouts down your fears or your doubts. It is a different dimension of communication altogether. It is the silent, intuitive knowing that flashes into your awareness without the process of human reasoning. It is that sudden, unbidden sense of peace that descends upon you in the midst of turmoil, a peace that the world did not give and the world cannot take away. It is an inner nudge, or divine pressure guiding you toward a certain path, or more often, away from a path your human will was determined to take. This is the true activity of the Christ, the truth of your being communicating itself to your human sense of self. This is where our work truly lies. It is the work of cultivating an inner silence, a listening attitude, so that we may become aware of this soundless voice. It requires a gentle yielding of our frantic mental activity, a releasing of our desperate need to figure everything out with the intellect. For the woman who feels pulled in a dozen directions, whose mind is a constant checklist of duties for others, this is your sacred invitation to pause, if only for a moment, and descend beneath the surface of the whirlwind. Your ability to nurture, to intuit the needs of others, is a reflection of this very principle. It is now to be turned inward, to nurture your own connection to the divine. For those in the later chapters of life, who may feel that the world's noise has less and less to offer, this is your great and glorious opportunity. The quieting of the outer life is not a diminishment, but a divine preparation, making space for you to hear with a clarity that was perhaps impossible in the rush of earlier years. Your accumulated experiences have stripped away the non-essential, leading you to this very threshold of spiritual hearing. This voice does not speak of past mistakes or future anxieties. It speaks only in the eternal now, revealing truth, harmony, and wholeness. It will not tell you which stock to buy or solve a mundane problem for you, but it will reveal the spiritual reality of any situation, showing you the harmony that already is beneath the appearance of discord. It is the voice that says, "Be still, and know that I am God." It is the imperative to rest from the labor of your own sense of selfhood and to let the divine consciousness be the actor, the speaker, the healer, the provider. To hear this voice is to be lifted above the battlefield of good and evil, of right and wrong, into the realm of pure spiritual being. It is to receive your instructions not from the shifting sands of human opinion, but from the rock of your own Christ identity. And it is in the quiet, Persistent listening for this voice that we prepare ourselves for the ultimate message, the final imperative that our topic today promises to reveal. Of course, here is the expansion of Keynote No. 3, continuing the flow from the previous section. This brings us to a point that is often the most difficult to grasp, yet it is the very key that unlocks the door. We have spoken of the Christ, and for many, that word is wrapped in the robes of history and theology, tied to a single, what glorious individual who walked the earth 2,000 years ago. But I must tell you, if we confine the Christ to a person, even to that most holy person, we miss the entire point of his message. His great purpose was not to be an exception, but to be an example. He came to show us the Christ not as a man, but as the true identity of every man and woman who has ever drawn breath. The Christ, then, is the impersonal truth of your being. It is the divine essence that constitutes your life. It is not your body, not your personality with all its quirks and memories, not your accomplishments or your failures. All of that is the costume you are wearing for this brief performance on earth. The Christ is the actor inside the costume. It is the I am that was before you were born, and the I am that will be after the costume is laid aside. It is the light of intelligence behind your eyes, the capacity to love that you feel, the hunger for truth that has brought you here today. That is not your human mind, that is the impersonal Christ, pressing against the confines of your personal sense of self, seeking to express more of itself as you. When you feel a surge of compassion for a stranger, that is not just you being a good person. That is the impersonal love of the Christ flowing through your individual expression of life. When you have a sudden insight, a solution to a problem that seems to come from nowhere, that is the impersonal intelligence of the Christ, revealing itself to you. You see, the Christ is not a person to be worshipped from afar. It is the very activity of God, the divine principle, functioning as your own consciousness. Your entire spiritual journey is not about making a personal self more holy, more pure, or more deserving. It is about the gradual, sometimes painful, dissolving of that personal sense, that little me with all its fears, its pride, its attachments, so that the infinite, impersonal I can shine forth unobstructed. This is why the message we are approaching is so urgent. It is not a personal warning to you, John or Mary, about your personal life. The personal sense of life is the very veil that separates us from reality. The call, the final imperative, is for this personal sense to yield, to step aside, to acknowledge a greater government, a greater intelligence, a greater life. It is the call to stop identifying as a seeker of truth, and to start identifying as the truth itself, which has always been here. This is the great transition, the passover from being a man who has a soul to being a spiritual being having a temporary human experience. And it is to this profound and necessary shift that our attention must now turn. For the time for playing at spirituality is over. The divine impulse within you is demanding full expression, and it will not be satisfied with anything less. Of course, here is the expansion of Keynote No. 4, continuing in a conversational and human tone. This is where the path becomes real, and where it demands something of us that is far beyond simply holding a new set of beliefs. To truly hear this message, we must be willing to look at a truth that can feel unsettling at first. This shift, this awakening to the Christ as your true self, is not just an addition to your life. It is not like adding a new room onto the house of your old identity. It is a total renovation that begins with a demolition. The mystics and saints have never shied away from this language. They speak of the dark night of the soul, of dying to the self. This is what that means. This experience, this final hearing of God's voice, represents the final death of the mortal sense of who you thought you were. What is this mortal sense? It is the accumulated weight of your entire personal history. It is the story of your hurts and your triumphs, your resentments and your pride. It is the voice that whispers, "I am not good enough," or "I am better than them." It is the part of you that feels like a victim of circumstances, that worries about the future, that clings to the past. It is the belief that you are a separate self, navigating a dangerous world alone, responsible for making everything happen through your own willpower and intelligence. This is the old man, the mortal sense, and it is the only thing that stands between you and the conscious experience of heaven on earth. This death is not a physical one, thank God. It is the death of an illusion. But I must be honest with you. It can feel like a death because you are being asked to let go of the very strategies you have used to feel safe and in control your entire life. You are being asked to release the grudges you've held onto so tightly because they have become part of your identity. You are being asked to surrender the need to manage your own reputation and to control the outcomes in your relationships. This feels like a death because the part of you that is being called to surrender does not want to die. It will fight for its life. It will tell you that this spiritual path is dangerous, that you will lose yourself, that you will become nothing. But here is the glorious secret. You are not losing yourself. You are losing the illusion of an isolated, separate, and limited self. You are losing the constriction to find your freedom. You are losing the noise to discover an eternal silence. It is the death of the acorn to become the oak tree. The acorn does not cease to be. It fulfills its true nature, but it must let go of its acorn form to do so. This is what is being asked of you now. This, last time you ever, is the final call for this mortal sense to yield. It is the ultimate invitation to stop trying to fix the old you, and to simply allow it to fall away so that the real, immortal, and radiant you can finally and fully emerge. This is not a punishment. It is the most profound act of grace, of course. Here is the expansion of Keynote No. 5, continuing the flow in a direct human tone. And this is the point where we can so easily become confused, where we might look for this great change in the wrong direction. We might start scanning the horizon of our outer life, waiting for a sign, for a thunderclap, for our circumstances to magically rearrange themselves into a picture of perfection. We think that if we just pray hard enough, God will come down and fix our problems, change our spouse, hand us a new job, or heal our body from the outside in. But this is to misunderstand the entire process. The event we are speaking of is not an outer one. The resurrection, the awakening, happens within the depths of your own consciousness. It is an inner event. Nothing on the outside needs to change for you to know God. Your bank account does not need to be a certain size. Your health does not need to be perfect. The people in your life do not need to become different people. The transformation occurs in the very substance of your thinking, in the quiet center of your own awareness. It is there, in the hidden places of your own heart, that the mortal sense of self is relinquished. It is there that the great exchange happens, where you trade your fear for a deep, abiding sense of peace that has no external reason for existing. It is there that you stop being a victim of the world you see and start recognizing that the world you experience is always a projection of the world within you. This is the most empowering truth you will ever grasp. It means you are not at the mercy of the world. Your freedom, your peace, your joy does not depend on something out there going your way. It depends entirely on this inner shift, on this yielding of your own thought to the divine presence that is already there. When you have a problem with another person, you are not called to change them. You are called to come back inside and heal the perception within your own consciousness that sees an enemy, a problem, or a source of conflict. When you face a lack, you are not called to beg God for money. You are called to turn within and feel the infinite abundance of divine life itself, until that feeling becomes your reality and then naturally expresses itself in your outer experience. The world will tell you that your happiness is conditional. It will tell you that you will be happy when you get the promotion, when you find the relationship, when you lose the weight. But this is the great lie of the mortal sense. The spiritual path reverses this entirely. It says that first, you must find the kingdom within. You must find that unconditional peace and joy at the center of your being, independent of all outer conditions. And then, and only then, will the outer world begin to reflect that inner harmony, the healing of the body, the improvement in relationships, the supply for your needs. These are not the goal. They are the byproducts, the natural and inevitable effects. What of the inner cause, which is your alignment with the divine? The miracle is not that the stormy sea becomes calm. The miracle is that you, in the midst of the storm, discover a calm that the storm cannot touch. And from that place of inner authority, you can then speak to the storm, of course. Here is the expansion of Keynote, 6, continuing the flow in a direct human tone. And so we arrive at the heart of the matter, the reason for the urgency in the message. It is not a threat from an angry God. It is the simple, sobering, and ultimately loving logic of spiritual reality. This inner event, this shift in consciousness, is not something you can put on a to-do list for someday when you have more time, when you retire, when the kids are grown, or when life gets less busy. The truth is, life may never get less busy. The world will always have another demand, another distraction, another crisis to capture your attention. That is its nature. And so, the call comes now. There is an urgency of now for this spiritual rebirth because your entire experience of life, whether it is one of struggle or peace, of bondage or freedom, hangs in the balance of this single realization. Think of it like a medical diagnosis. If a doctor told you that you had a condition that, if addressed today, could be completely healed, but if left until next year, would become irreversible, you would not hesitate. You would drop everything. You would make it your number one priority. This is the spiritual diagnosis. The condition is the belief that you are a separate, mortal self, living in a world of other separate selves, competing for limited resources. This belief is the source of all your fear, all your loneliness, all your conflict and dissatisfaction. And the window for its healing is not forever. It is this lifetime. It is this very moment. The last time you ever is the final warning that the opportunity to see through this illusion is here, now in this breath, and it may not come again with such clarity. This is not about a cosmic countdown or a day of judgment on a calendar. It is about the trajectory of your own soul. Every time you hear this truth and think, I will attend to that later, you are strengthening the habit of the mortal sense. You are building a thicker wall between yourself and reality. You are, in a sense, saying no to the divine invitation. And there may come a point where you stop hearing the invitation altogether, not because God has stopped calling, but because your inner ear has become so accustomed to the noise of the world that the silent voice can no longer be distinguished. The urgency is about your own capacity to hear. This is the last time, because the pressure of the Christ within you has reached a tipping point. It will not be content to remain hidden any longer. It is pushing, pressing, demanding expression. It is the seed cracking open in the dark soil. It cannot reverse the process. It must grow into the light. This is what is happening within you now. The divine impulse is saying, now is the time. Let go of the old shell. It is safe to emerge. To hesitate is to choose to remain in the dark confinement of the seed, when the warmth of the sun is already shining just above you. The rebirth is not a future event to be hoped for. It is a present activity, waiting only for your conscious cooperation, for your unconditional surrender to the process that is already and always underway within you.